Cowen downgrades Tesla despite huge backlog of work and orders. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So we also want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe. Try to get a better position here. So today's show is really devoted to the fact that there's a company called Cowen and Company that's, I believe, based in New York. And one of their analysts came out with a report saying that Tesla was suffering what he called, in essence, a saturation relative to the number of vehicles distributed and sold by Tesla. So we were fascinated because Tesla's stock price went from about 430 down to a close of 413 on that report. And we had actually anticipated this happening based on a routine effort by certain entities to try to sabotage the stock price of Tesla. So we wanted to take the opportunity to sort of, as our final show of 2019, review what's currently going on and what we expect to happen as we head into earnings related to sales of vehicles for this quarter. So the first thing that we wanted to review is we sort of wanted to go through the demand side. So evidently Tesla's supply has improved dramatically because of the fact that they're now doing 35 gigawatt hours per annum worth of batteries at the Panasonic facility in Reno. We also, there are a number of sort of data points we're using to get a feel for where we think Tesla is currently. So the first one is that Norway is showing a record in deliveries. The second is the Netherlands is showing a record for deliveries. The third item we wanted to share is that as of November, there are 5,000 Model 3s built in the United States and shipped to China that were actually sold, or registered, I shouldn't say, registered in China. And this 5,000 number was up from 389 Model S and X's that sold in November of last year. The next thing that we wanted to review is that, so these are some of the clues that we're using to get a feel for. We don't know what the actual number is that were sold by Tesla, but we're using them as somewhat of a guide of what to expect when the numbers finally come out. There are some other sort of touch points that one could use to assess kind of what's going on, and that is for us, we showed 3 shows ago, we showed you a live show with images of what's been going on outside of our local service facility. And the number one thing we noticed was that there's a real dearth of cars, particularly Model 3s, and it looks like sort of demand has really sucked up a lot of supply to the point where there's another problem that sort of popped up, which is that for the first time we've seen in the last 3 years, Tesla has been forced to tell owners that they can't get their cars by the end of the year, and they're therefore forced into the new year when they'll purchase their cars. And one of the policy shifts for this year that was in place last year was that there was an interesting phenomenon where Tesla would actually lower the prices to meet the number that was lost previously by consumers when it came to purchasing their vehicles outside of the year that they had to meet in order to get their discounts. So buyers were warned in early November to get their orders in, otherwise they would miss the opportunity. And when they missed that, Tesla did not make up for that. So that's another data point that suggests to us that there's a lot of demand, and Tesla is actually meeting that demand. So in general, what all this suggests is that there's a large number of places that are demonstrating a great deal of demand for Tesla vehicles, and record demand at that. And so we're using this as a guide to suggest that the numbers will at least meet the expectations of Tesla, but perhaps exceed those statistics. The next thing that we wanted to look at is the fact that there were some numbers that we covered relative to the China facility that came up, and we want to kind of modify those based on new information. So basically, the head of China, Tesla, indicated that they were exceeding 1,000 vehicles a week being produced. What they also discussed was the fact that they were producing 280 cars a day. So in order to have it be 1,000 vehicles and 280 cars a day, that would mean they're working for 3 days a week. And what we've come to find out is they're actually doing a 6-day-a-week work schedule currently on one shift. So basically, the numbers you're talking about is 6 times 280 vehicles per week. And if you multiply that by 52 weeks in a year, it comes up to 87,000 vehicles per year being produced at the current rate. The other thing that should be noted is Tesla's adding a second shift. So once that second shift comes into play, this is when we get to Elon Musk's stated 3,000 vehicles per week being produced. So we think that all those numbers are achievable, especially if the battery exists to go into it. And those kind of numbers seem a lot more consistent with what the capability is of the size of facility that Tesla has in place. So as we were heading, to do our story, one of the other stories that we came across is the fact that the folks from Panasonic actually have come back and said that they've already started bringing in the staff necessary from Japan, combined with local hiring, to push the headcount to the level to allow them to get to 54 gigawatt hours, or basically double the amount of battery production that they were doing ahead of the arrival of the Model Y, which, as you know, Elon has indicated, will outsell all of the other Tesla vehicles being produced combined. So what we're talking about here is a very, very large up-ramp in demand for Tesla's vehicles. The one other data point that I keep watching an eye on, and occasionally every couple of 3 days try to evaluate what's going on, is if you look up what's going on in Australia currently, they have a situation where they've gotten shiploads of Model 3s in, and every shipload delivery is completely sold out as soon as it hits. And from what we can gather from all of this, they're in the 20 to 30,000 vehicles short zone in Australia. And I particularly like focusing on that country because there's a lot of goodwill that Tesla has built up based on the energy solutions that they've helped implement in Australia. So we think this is an important country for that reason, but we're also seeing, very good response from the buying public on all Tesla vehicles, but especially as the price of the Model 3 comes in a price range that's a lot more reasonable for many people. So, the bottom line is that we're seeing all kinds of demand for Tesla products across the board of whatever they make, especially with the Model 3, as you know, about the Cybertruck, et cetera. So the issues that Cowen raised about lack of demand that was arriving based on saturation, we think are unfounded. And what's nice for Tesla is instead of just having to rely on a U.S. market, that global footprint allows Tesla to build product targeted to wherever it is in the world that demand is at the peak. And there are a lot of signs that Tesla is slowing delivery to certain locations because demand exceeds supply versus the other way around. So we think that this is exciting news. The China trade deal was just mentioned as another item. China trade deal isn't affecting Tesla that much because they've been exempted from the tariffs when it comes to China on all vehicles, and especially the ones that are being built in country. So, there's a lot of really good news that's out there. And this sort of brings up the question of, well, why would Cowen do this? And the answer we're coming up with is that the hedge funds that are Tesla negative are in a position right now where they're kind of desperate. We're in a period where once Tesla's numbers come out and we head into the new year, there's a prospect of the stock going very, very high, driven by all these demand elements that we just talked about. So there's the potential for those that were short the stock to end up in a very difficult position when it comes to being on the low or downgrade side. So in the case of Cowen, in this case, they actually reiterated the fact that the stock was worth about $240, which is half of the current price. But they did indicate that it was an upgrade from $170. So I guess you could say that at least they're saying there's the possibility that they won't go out of business, but they're not going to do that great. The stock price will get cut in half. So we'll see who's right about this, and we think that the news for Tesla is excellent, with a great deal of positive news to drive where the stock is going to be in the short and long term. So the other sort of note here is just the fact that it really shows the power of hedge funds to use their money to sort of create the weather they want to drive a stock in a certain direction. So we're kind of in a space right now that's called a quiet period. As you know, today's the last day for sales for this quarter. Tesla formally is not allowed to say anything until after the quarter's closed relative to number of vehicles sold, and then they're going to follow up in February with the whole quarter's numbers, which shows a lot more information than you can get on this front end. We are anticipating that Tesla will be profitable, number one. We're also anticipating that they'll show strong growth, and again, followed up by the fact that there's enough batteries rolling in or rolling out of the factory to support exceeding previous numbers on cars sold. What we're also intrigued by is that there's this discussion of saturation by Cowen, but it really didn't seem to cover the fact that there are all these demand elements that are rolling in for Tesla that they're going to be addressing profitably. So again, it's a real example of the power of certain organizations to use their power, I want to say, for negative good. And if they're being compensated to do so, we understand why they're doing so. So we want to move on. So long-winded statement to say, we think that the downgrade it makes sense, but it doesn't represent reality in any way. And we think that the numbers of vehicles sold, et cetera, will demonstrate that. The other thing we were surprised by with the statements made was that Tesla has a huge backlog. So if you look at the Cybertruck, if you look at the Semi, if you look at the Roadster, if you look at the Model Y, there's a huge list of vehicles there that represent backlog on orders for Tesla. And so one of the things we were surprised by in the Cowen report is they did not emphasize the fact that there are a number of vehicles for which there are already deposits and large numbers of people waiting on them. And so as these sort of folks deliver, or these products are delivered to customers, we're really going to see a lot of product moving out beyond what currently Tesla sells. So the saturation issue they may have discussed as you spread that discussion across a broader number of vehicles really doesn't exist. So, we'll keep you posted on everything that we learn, and we look forward to your input and questions to drive things that we might cover in this space. We're going to we have a plan to make the Cybertruck sort of a once a week or once every other week focus as new information comes in. But as a way to add to our discussion closing out the year, we just wanted to note that all the vehicles that we just discussed in that long line have an interesting situation. The semi-truck factory we think is almost done if it's not already done, and it's someplace in the Livermore, California area. The Roadster, it's possible that it'll be blended in production in Fremont, but we also think that they need somewhat of a dedicated facility to produce as well. So what we're talking about right now is the fact that Tesla is in a pinch. They are limited in terms of capital on hand or ways in which to raise capital to grow the number of production facilities they have. So what's actually happening is they're going to rely on the profitability over the next couple of 3 quarters to make it into the S&P, but also to have the capital necessary to line up to build to build a factory to build the Cybertruck. You could suggest the Cybertruck would be blended in on the same line as the Model X or S or the Model 3 or Y. But the challenge there is because they don't really share that many parts, I think it's going to be difficult to get one line to carry alternate vehicles, including the Cybertruck, and because there's so many elements of it that are way different. And so I guess it's possible it could occur, but what this suggests is we have about a year-long process during which you would actually build a small factory to manage the 100,000 to 200,000 vehicles a year that are needed for the Cybertruck. And the issue with that new factory is Tesla just doesn't have the cash right now to do it. Will they have the cash if the stock price continues as it is, number one? And if we also have profitability being in place over the next few quarters, Tesla will have the cash for that. But that is when we'll see, unless you can get it to be done in Germany or another Chinese plant to be filled, we expect to see that vehicle and its production facilities start being built middle of 2020, maybe late 20, to be available end of 2021, beginning of 22. And the one fly in the ointment of this is if in fact the demand for the truck is as big as Tesla's talking about, we don't think that the one facility is going to be sufficient. I think there's going to need to be 2. And it further goes back to our earlier thesis, which is if you're already busy trying to produce this large run of vehicles, you want to do the Cybertruck sooner than later, but where's the money going to come from to build it if you're not allowed to borrow any more money? So the answer to this, by the way, could be just sell some stock and you're okay. So we'll see how this all works out. But we wanted to sort of throw that piece of information out there because we were very surprised to see that there are some buyers, users that are anticipating the Cybertruck being delivered in the time that was discussed. And I believe that Tesla really wants to build in that time frame that was discussed. But there's the reality of the fact that they just don't have the cash to do it, even though they do want to. So, what that means then is that if you're thinking Cybertruck, add a year to your plan, and you're right in the realistic zone. And, not because they don't want to do it on the time that they said, but the Chinese facility was the only delivery of vehicles that was on time that Tesla's executed, and all that money came from it's other people's money. It all came from somewhere else. I'm seeing a lot of questions related to what's the number going to be, and therefore what earnings are going to be on the quarter. I think that Tesla will meet or exceed. There are certain laws, i.e. the SEC, that limits what you can say here. So our inclination then is to give a general sense that there are multiple components to how you assess how the stock is doing. One is how many vehicles did you produce, and therefore there's going to be a number that spins off of that from revenue or profit standpoint. There's also a profit margin question. There's also a what's the forecast beyond? So you can't have a stock that produces great numbers today, but if the forecast of their backlog and future business is actually ugly, there's a chance that that stock price could actually crash soon after they deliver those earnings. I don't think that's the case with Tesla, but there are a lot of variables that drive the value of a stock. So as we've seen previously, and I encourage all of you to be mindful of, there is the phenomenon where, in the case of a company like Tesla, the hedge funds will see a number, run for the hills, the stock price will drop suddenly dramatically, and then all of a sudden things will swing in an opposite direction because you now have a shift from what the needs are of the short-term folks in the hedge fund businesses back to what the long-term buyers and institutions are looking for, when they're looking for a stock to put long-term money in. So I believe the long-term money is in Tesla and will continue to be there based on the backlog of products that we just covered. And in the short term, I do believe that there are going to be issues related to how the short-term for the hedge funds will actually treat the stock, because their orientation is the next 20, 30, 60 days, not the next 2, 3, 4 years. So I think it's worth being mindful of that, because those large institutions have tended to swing back into the stock in a very strong way, which we think makes sense. At any rate, we've sort of gone through our formal process here as to main story we wanted to cover for today, and we're happy to field questions at this point, because we typically don't do so earlier. I wanted to thank all of you from around the world for giving us hello greetings. I'm actually impressed to see a degree of interest in locations where you can't get Teslas formally currently, but the story and the potential of its impact is strong enough to reach out to territories that Tesla has not gone to formally. I wanted to congratulate the folks in Israel on now getting a commitment from Tesla to show up there, and they're opening in, I guess, Tel Aviv Mall to start, and then starting with a service center. I think that's really cool to see an expansion into a country that's not targeted towards an entity like China with 1 billion people, etc. So it's nice to see it get into new locations. Greetings from the UK as well. Thank you. Any rate, I wanted to, as we close out today, I wanted to admit we have a sort of a weird addition to our health list, and that is that we had a conversation about, semi-delivery is supposed to start in the summer of this coming year and then not get strong until summer of 2021, but we will see what happens. Prostate cancer. Or prostate issues. I was told by an expert in the area that in your 60s, there's a 60% chance of issues there. In your 70s, 70%. In your 80s, 80%. So we definitely have a health focus on our show. I wanted to encourage you to get checked and address issues early as a way to make sure early issues are addressed and they don't become a huge problem going down the road. And so the rest of our list includes, don't forget your 25 leg lifts. I was really surprised to learn something, which is many people end up with back issues or back pain related to releasing the hip flexors. So I wanted to encourage you to consider with your leg lifts some stretches designed to in essence, put one leg in front of the other and extend so that you have a stretch going through your quad muscles is a way to release the hip flexors and reduces sort of back pain issues typically. I didn't know about that, just learned about that, wanted to share with you as a new sort of health item I'll be working on as we enter the new year. I wanted to share it with you as well. Also wanted to encourage you to consider something in that 5-2 diet related to introducing some fasting into your eating schedule as a way to help health in that regard as well. And then don't forget, don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4. Let the food digest so that you don't get sort of acid reflux issues as you sleep. Thanks for the Kalank's comment there. That's another thing to consider, and definitely makes sense to blend it into your health process for better outcomes. At any rate, thank you very much for your comments, everyone, and I look forward to your after-show comments. We do have our PayPal note there if you want to support the channel. We're trying to change up mics, camera, etc., and we appreciate your support in that regard. Also wanted to note, I'm wearing a dashiki today. No, it's not a night robe. Along with some friends, we worked with an entity called the Ethereum Mission and built a hospital in Accra, Ghana. So I've worn a couple of the sort of outfits that were given to me by them, and we're happy to see them get a hospital built in Accra that would help people with their health issues. And the Ethereum Mission is the name of the group, and I think they're doing a good job. Very good point, Donovan. Thanks for a reminder on that. Again, we have a Patreon option for donations. We also have our PayPal info on there if you'd like to support the channel in that regard. Also wanted to remind you that we're really grateful for the support that you guys provided so we could drop off goodies to the local to our local service center just after Christmas. At any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lichtrot, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi. Wanted to also say Zdravstvuyte, Russian, hello, Ni hao ma, Chinese, hello, as well as there are a few folks in Africa and also in Latvia, etc., that have said hello. I want to say salam in America was just put on there. Happy New Year to all of you. We look forward to covering Tesla and the electric revolution aggressively going forward. And definitely your questions and input definitely influences what we cover and how. Have a great day. Bye for now. And in Jamaica, we say, no respect, walk good man. Thanks and have a good day. Goodbye.